And good morning, good morning, good morning. This is the Doug Rice Show. I am Doug Rice. Welcome, one and all. It is 8 o'clock in the morning on the 27th of November 2023. And thank you so much for looking at me. I am Doug Rice. Welcome to the Doug Rice Show, brought to you by Twitwear. Yeah, buddy, Twitwear, the epitome of sportswear, skincare, beard oils. I like saying the beard oils. I'm going to be getting me some of the beard oils. How are you doing this morning? Focus, 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 because that's what we got to do this morning. It is Monday, and I hope everyone is keeping up with current events. Current events will not relent. Yes, I have no hat. I am done with all of that. Yeah, I decided to make a clean break, a little bit of a lean remake, get the hat off. So many have commented about my leanings militarily, and I will tell you without doubt, though I was in the Marine Corps and served, I am in no way in support of this government and its treatment of Negroes, specifically. It's treated everybody else poorly, I understand that, but I've gotten into the weeds of how we got here, our origins, all of that, and it has canceled out any affinity I may have had toward the country that is held captive the ancestors that all of us hold dear. So, good morning, how are you? Welcome here. My name again is Doug Rice. We're going over something this morning from the 13th tribe. Arthur Koestler and his wife found dead in their homes, him having written this publication. And we've gone over it a few times. We're going to go over chapter 4 today. But I have a video I want to send your way, folks. And do me a favor, like, subscribe, share, all the things you see down there. Do that for me. Don't ignore me. And while you do that, I am going to present to you first DougRice.com. I'm getting it worked on today. We'll get it fixed. I just like the way it looks, So we've got something here from, I'd say, about the 70s, okay? And what it does is it explains what the Jewish Talmud, Talmud, what that Talmud says about babies, Jesus, Christmas, and Negroes, what it says about Black people. So I'm going to give you a chance to look through this very, very informative short video. We'll stop from time to time. We'll comment. You'll hear my rhyme, but for God's sake, be inclined to hear this. Here we go. I need you to hear this very carefully, because the same Jewish converts that have occupied the state of Israel, this is what they adhere to. So what we're having here, folks, just to give you a brief update, we're about to go into the 13th tribe, specifically where these Kazarian converts come from. And in many respects, they reflect and connect themselves to what Joshua called, murderous vipers whose father was the devil. Those individuals are the same people that occupy the state of Israel. And if you don't believe me, take a look at what they do. Take a look at their Talmud. And well, you'll see. Here we go. I don't know about you. That sounds like he should be liable to execution. Or maybe it's the haircut. Is that it? And remember, these same Pharisaic, Sadducetic vipers, the synagogue of Satan, they are occupying Jerusalem. They sit upon the hills of Jerusalem claiming to be Jews and are not. But let's see what else they got. Oh, Jesus wasn't no white dude either, by the way. No sound. There's no sound? Who said there's no sound? No sound on the video. Seriously? How is that possible? Hold on. No sound on the video. You don't hear the video? Okay, so what is going on? You do not hear that sound, really? Hold on, man. Hold on. Because I'll start this sucker over. I'm a little bit perturbed here. So let me understand this. You guys don't hear the sound? All right, hold on. I'm going to fix this. Bear with me. I'll bet you hear the sound now. All right, we're going to start this over. Excuse me. And I do apologize. I do have my team. They help me. I appreciate it. We're going to try this again. And I guarantee there's going to be sound this time. Hold on.
There, those same Pharisees who killed Jesus Christ remain the undisputed rulers of Judaism.
In Babylon, the Pharisees codified their oral traditions into the Babylonian Talmud, the written form of that oral tradition which Jesus so bitterly rebuked. The Talmud reveals how deep was Israel's apostasy. The Talmud also helps us understand the basis for Christ's unflattering descriptions of the Pharisees.
Jesus described the Pharisees as hypocrites, children of hell, blind guides, whited sepulchres, full of dead men's bones. He even described the Pharisees as children of their father the devil, a murderer from the beginning.
All right, now, first, let me know if you can hear that. That's first. I appreciate it. I understand you might have heard that. We've gone over the Babylonian Talmud in the past, and hopefully you can hear what's being said. These same individuals that have created the Babylonian Talmud are the same individuals who connectively are responsible for the death of the Messiah. So we're going to go over today where they're from. Okay, we're going to figure out where they're from. But before we do that, I want to go over this video, which is not too long, and it talks about what the Jews believe about Black people, Negroes, babies, what they believe about Christmas, what they believe about Jesus. I don't care about what they believe about Christmas, but we're going to go over this. So first, hopefully you can hear it. If you can, listen up. This is going to be interesting.
The Talmud confirms Christ's words. In the Talmud, in Treatise Sanhedrin, an extensive passage describes the right of the Pharisee to kill anyone, just as long as he did so indirectly. As one of dozens of examples, the Talmud tells us that if one bound his neighbor and he died of starvation, he is not liable to execute.
Do you see that? And this is where I want you to hear this and understand this well. The Jewish people that occupy the state of Israel from BB on down, okay? All of these individuals adhere to the Jewish Talmud. All of them believe that you can do things like this. If you bound your neighbor and he dies of starvation, he's not liable for execution. All of these individuals from Netanyahu on down believe that your lives, my lives, are of less value than theirs. And they are Canaanites. You know, the folks that the Creator determined should be destroyed. So you need to understand the lie that's going on here involving these individuals. So I'll have you hear this, and please share and like, subscribe, all of that. Listen carefully.
Execution. In such an indirect manner, the Pharisees also killed Christ. Manipulating the Romans to actually wield the spear and sword, the Pharisees claimed, as their descendants do today, that since the Romans were the direct cause of the death of Christ, it is the Romans, not the Jews, who are guilty. Christ also called the Pharisees adulterers, an adulterous generation. The Talmud provides generous loopholes for adultery. It says the penalty for adultery does not include sex with a minor.
The penalty for adultery does not include sex with a minor. This is the Jewish Talmud. You understand? This is not some ethereal make-believe that I'm just pulling out of my ass. These folks over in Israel that are murdering indiscriminately and claiming to be of God believe in this. Please listen carefully.
The wife of a minor or the wife of a heathen. The Talmud also encourages seduction of unwed adolescent girls called designated bondmaids. But it's important how such rapes are performed. With the designated bondmaid, one is guilty only in the case of natural connection, but not in the case of perverse connection. The Pharisees reasoned that rape in a perverted manner is outside the jurisdiction of the law.
These are the people that the world seems to be defending, and I do mean the white world, the European world, the world fraught with child sex trafficking, the world that won't somehow in the state of California outlaws child sex trafficking. These individuals, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Jewish Talmud of today believes in these things, and the white European westernized world supports these abhorrently vile hedonistic heathens who claim that they're of God. These are their practices. This is what they believe. And they've killed 14,000 Palestinians that don't believe in having sex with children. You better ask Netanyahu does he believe in the Talmud? Does he believe in oral circumcision? These are the people that are being supported. This is the state of Israel. Vipers, workers of lawlessness. You're going to hear more. One moment.
Normal rape, however, was punishable. In Babylon, sexual perversion of every kind had been a way of life for millenniums. The Pharisees were deeply influenced by such practices.
In 3 of the major treatises of the Talmud are found extensive passages which give legal endorsement to seduce and marry 3-year-old baby girls. In fact, many of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, including Simeon ben Yochai, upheld this privilege.
Oh, are we hearing things? You didn't hear that? Talk to me. Talk to me, brothers and sisters. Talk to me and tell me why a world somehow is supporting Jews who believe in the Talmud. Tell me how the world can support a vile, sadistic group of monsters that are behind such things. We know who fuels these kinds of operations. We know who fuels them. And we know why now. The Talmud. Let the world know that's what these creatures believe.
Today in Israel, thousands of Jews go to Meron every year to venerate the memory of Simeon ben Yochai. one of the most respected rabbis in the history of Judaism.
In one of dozens of endorsements of child sex, Simeon ben Yohai said, "A proselyte under the age of 3 years and a day is permitted to marry a priest." Agreeing with ben Yohai, the great Rabbah said, "When a grown-up man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing, for when the girl is less than this, 3 years and a day, it is as if one put the finger into the eye."
What? Monday morning, Doug Wright Show, no hat. How you like that? This is who these people are. This is who Benjamin Netanyahu is. This is who that demon-looking, pale ghost of a defense minister. That dude looks like a straight. What does he look like? He looks like a vampire. He looks sickly and ill. They all look sickly and ill. The blood barely keeping itself within their frame. You can see it just edging out their lips and their eyes. They're being deconstructed right before you. And here's the reason why. They are a corrupt, ghastly bunch of ghouls. And you need to understand, this ain't like me making this up. So let's take some more of this, y'all. Like, subscribe, and share the Talmud. This is what the United States sends billions of dollars over to Israel to protect and defend. Hold on.
The footnote to this passage says, "As tears come to the eye again and again, so does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years." The same section confirms that sexual activity with small boys is in the same category.
Oh, really? Can you hear it now? Huh? Is the sound turned up for you? Do I need to give it more sound? Can you hear it now? Huh? Now, remember, this is what they're defending. This is what they're defending. Every time you see the Star of David, every time you see him on MSNBC, CNN, every time you see the ADL, Mr. Goddamned Greenblatt, that bald-headed demon, every time you look at these motherfuckers, you remember what they stand for. Do you hear me, Negros? Okay, let's continue.
The intercourse of a small boy is not regarded as a sexual act. In addition to adulterers, Christ, in the story of the Good Samaritan, portrayed the Pharisees as racial bigots, too self-righteous to respond to the suffering of one who was not a Jew. It is true, because of the wickedness of the Canaanites, which included sodomy and infant sacrifice.
So, and the reason I got to mute and come unmute is because if I don't, you're going to hear an echo. So, the Canaanites screw children. And it seems that genetically, DNA-wise, the people in the state of Israel, these abhorrently vile creatures, these demon-infused individuals, they seem to have the same practices of the Canaanites that they're related to. So I don't know. Well, let's just continue, because this is going to be good.
Israel had been commanded by God to be harsh in her treatment of the inhabitants of the land. God made it clear that the Canaanites were not simply to be avoided, but destroyed. By the time of the New Testament, this method of preserving God's kingdom by separation and the sword had become obsolete. God no longer made a racial difference between men.
But the Pharisees were unfazed by God's new agenda. The Talmud was finally written down nearly 5 centuries after Christ, yet its critical, even homicidal attitudes toward Gentiles might have been lifted out of the book of Joshua. However, the quickest way to grasp the Talmudic view of Gentiles is not directly from the Talmud, but from the Jewish encyclopedias. If we quote an isolated opinion from the Talmud, a rabbi may quickly object, saying, "But that is not the overall opinion of the Talmud. That is not the definitive view." What the Jewish encyclopedia provides us is a definitive overview of perhaps hundreds of rabbinic statements on any subject.
And what Negroes, and specifically those of us that pay attention to these creatures, need to understand is they have it all written down. They got it all written down. Everything they think of you. Oh, and they think you're Goyim. You need to understand what these individuals believe over in that land. And they are murdering by the thousands to keep it this way. It's a wonder. I'm trying to figure out why the Islamic world doesn't open up their mouth with something to say. Maybe they've got some skeletons in their closet as well. All right, let's just continue.
Giving us accurate summaries of what the Talmud generally teaches.
In its article on Gentiles, the Jewish Encyclopedia begins to define what makes a Jew so different from a Gentile. According to the rabbis, only Israelites are men. Gentiles they class not as men, but as barbarians.
Let me say this, the reflective nature of what they express has a lot to do with how they're addressed. Do you understand what I'm saying? They want so bad not to be barbarians that they will lie through their goddamned teeth about who they are. Now we know all of these white Jewish people come from the Caucasus Mountains. They are converts. They are not by any way related to Shem. They are Japhetic in their descent. So it's interesting that they say only Israel are men. I don't know. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing, but it's interesting that they make that assertion and everybody else is a beast? What? This is very interesting that they make this assertion. You kind of wonder what the real truth is. It might be in reversing. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm going to keep going because this is pissing me off. So.
Since Gentiles are not men in the fullest sense, so the Gentile is not a neighbor of a Jew. Further, since Gentile laws were too crude to admit of reciprocity, meaning too crude to be taken seriously, the Gentile was forever beneath the Jew. Gentiles were outlawed by God from the beginning, and thus had no property rights. The Almighty offered the Torah to the Gentile nations also, but since they refused to accept it, he withdrew his shining legal protection from them and transferred their property rights to Israel.
Well, now, seems like they're talking in reverse. They've got the details down, don't they? But they somehow have applied all that they know to themselves. Isn't that something? What a rude awakening these beings have. Oh, yeah.
Who observed his law. Since the Talmud outlawed the child, or issue of a Gentile, as that of a beast, a Gentile had as little legal rights in a Jewish court as did an animal. The Talmud states that if a Gentile sue an Israelite, the verdict is for the defendant, the Israelite. Conversely, if the Israelite is the plaintiff, he obtains full damages. Because the Talmud conspires against Gentiles, if a Jew was ever caught telling a Gentile what the Talmud really says, such a person deserves death.
Okay, so now we have it. They want to keep their vile secrets, these disgusting individuals. All the practices that they keep hidden behind closed doors. And we hear little bits of it coming. We know. We hear little bits of what they do. We know about little things that they do. We know about the organ transplants. Every time there is a trafficking of organs that they get busted, every name that you see is damn near Jewish. Every time you hear about sex, child trafficking, every name that you see is damn near Jewish. We ain't playing no games on this show, folks. I don't know where you thought you was going. This is the Doug Rice Show. Hats off, folks. Hats off. This is who the world, the white world, is defending. And some of the black world are defending these vile, abhorrently gruesome creatures who think they can have sex with children. You know, and we haven't even scratched the surface. They're encyclopedic about their horrors. And we're allowing these fools to simply tell the lie unchallenged. Well, those days are over. Let's get to it.
So vile was the nature of a Gentile that the great Simeon ben Yohai said, "The best among the Gentiles deserves to be killed. The best of snakes ought to have its head crushed." Jews, however, are exalted beings in the Talmud, worthy of praise. Christ described the Pharisee who blessed himself, saying, "I thank thee, Lord, that I am not as other men." An eminent Talmudic rabbi says the same. "Blessed be thou, who hast not made me a Goy, or Gentile." There is a special antagonism between the Talmud and Jesus. The Talmud attacks him everywhere it can, even his mother. Mary, the Talmud says, was a whore who mated with carpenters. She who was the descendant of princes and governors played the harlot with carpenters. It naturally followed that the scribes declared Christ to be a bastard. In its article on Jesus, the Jewish Encyclopedia says that Jewish writings defame Christ. It is the tendency of all these sources to belittle the person of Jesus by ascribing to him illegitimate birth, magic, and a shameful death. Jesus, according to this article, was considered one of the 3 worst enemies of Judaism who came to an ignoble end. The Talmud says they subjected him to 4 deaths: stoning, burning, decapitation, and strangling.
Who are these people? Who are these Jews? Who are these creatures? Now, y'all think you know what they represent. You think you know. You think they represent the Star of David and they're the chosen, right? You think that the Holocaust was just a one-off. You think that, you know, the hatred for these maleficent individuals, the synagogue of Satan, clearly, they're a synagogue of Satan. So how is it they have the entire world fooled into thinking that they're somehow good? They're not. Have you looked at these folks and what they represent? Do you see their practices? Go get a Talmud. Understand why they wanted all of this kept secret. This is where they're from. This is who they are. Next time you see one of these creatures grinning your goddamn face, you better understand what they believe about you. Let's continue about some information.
The Talmud also says he is now in hell, punished with boiling hot excrement. What is Christ's advice as he speaks to us out of hell? The Jewish Encyclopedia quotes Jesus as telling us above all to bless the Jews. He says, "Further their well-being, do nothing to their detriment. Whoever touches them touches even the apple of his eye."
Y'all you getting enough? What's wrong? What's wrong? No. They're over in Israel. You know, Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, every one of these soldiers that's over in the Gaza Strip, all of the Jews that believe in Judaism believe in this Talmud. And this is what they believe about your black ass. And every other white person that's not a Jew, they consider them goyim. And it's just how they've gotten the world to somehow ignore the Talmud, the core belief of their existence. But I tell you what it does do. It tells me why they have been pursued. Anybody with half a brain that looks in one of these things and what they're saying would literally do everything they could to expose these crooks. I wasn't gonna call them what I wanted to, but you got to think of this, man. This is real life. They're killing people to keep their way of life going. And this is their way of life, just so you know.
Christians, as followers of the false prophet Jesus, also deserve death. The Jewish Encyclopedia again recaps the Talmud's position. A Gentile observing the Sabbath deserves death. The testimony of a Christian was not admitted in evidence in Jewish courts, and an Israelite who found anything belonging to one who was a Christian was forbidden to return it to him.
The Pharisees, through their Talmud, thus gave the Jews an ethic which encouraged bigotry and isolation. But it did worse than that. It invited persecution. By the 11th century, the inhabitants of Babylon, growing weary of the self-righteousness and dishonesty of the Jews, expelled them to the West.
That's part of our faith. They had to read the Bible, the Torah. And that carried the Jewish people as a unique people, people of the book, as we called it. The people of the book not only knew the book, they could read the book. The capacity to ask questions, which is what the Talmudic tradition did.
Okay, so gaze upon this sickening, vile, disgusting creature who has now let you know he believes in the Talmud. He believes in the Talmud and he's special. This blonde-haired European convert, this descendant from Khazaria, this goddamned Ukrainian. This man ain't from the Middle East. He's a Polish Jew. His name isn't even Netanyahu. His father changed their name when they moved from Poland to Israel. He's not from Israel. He is not a freaking Jew. He's a pretender. That's what he is. And he's a murderous, criminally liable, and he's a true, he's a Jew. That's what he is. He is exactly what they are. And it just pisses me off because the dude, you know, he sits up there as arrogantly wrong as he can be, lying to the world for everybody to see. He's not anything associated with the chosen. He's not of God. It's mighty odd, man. And when you got the receipts, man, it's like they shouldn't be able to compete. This is the reason we know God Almighty is coming to remove them. They're like ticks dug in too deep. When I look at this, just a walking falsehood, a lie. This guy has nothing to do with being the apple of God's eye. What he is the synagogue of Satan's leader. And he's going to get exactly what the Creator promised they would get. And that part is coming up yet. Let's
Across Jewish communities, it never defined the end of knowledge. It never put an exclamation mark on truth. It was constantly questioning, expanding, growing, exchanging between communities, between great scholars and their students. It never ended. It was always iterative. This culture exploded when the walls of the ghetto went down. This same tradition, this same culture is part of us. It's deeply ingrained in our culture, in our thinking, in our traditions.
hold on. Okay, so I wanted to begin with that. 34 minutes past the hour. How are you? My name is Doug Rice. This is the Doug Rice Show. So that, my friends, was what the Jews think of you. That's the Jewish Talmud. I hope you understand what you saw, because this is what they believe today. They believe in having sex with children. They don't have a problem having sex with children 3 years old. Boys, girls, doesn't matter. They believe that they can kill you only because they're a Jew. They believe that their lives are somehow magnified when in fact, in God's eyes, they are a true synagogue of Satan, vipers, workers of lawlessness. So that's the happening salvo. I just don't even know what to do. It just kind of throws me how this has developed. But now we segue into the 13th tribe and where they are from, because they are not Jews. They are not jewels of God. You know, these folks are the most vile, corrupt, diseased, mentally ill group of Canaanite descendants the world has ever seen. And what happened is the West armed these Rh negative Neanderthals because they're their kin. You look at both of them, they're all whitey then. But God's coming to correct this, so that's that we'll leave that there. All right, now today, hope everybody's enjoying yourself. I hope you understood the meaning of that last video. I hope that you like, subscribe, and share. I hope that you share that with everybody, because it's in my opinion, it is an absolute. It's a travesty that anyone supports these vile fucking creatures. Go read the Talmud. Go read the Jewish Encyclopedia. Now we're going to find out where these creatures are from. All right. This is not long, so don't worry about it. All right. 13th tribe, Arthur Koestler. Arthur Koestler wrote this book to expose his own people. Arthur Koestler wrote this book so that, you know, the lie wouldn't continue into the future. And it cost him his life. Both he and his wife found dead in their home. That's how far they've gone to protect the lie that they've lived for so long. And now we're going to figure out where they're from. And we'll stop a minute or two and we'll talk about it. Hold on. I want to do something a little different, make sure that we don't get the sound coming there. All right. So we're going to talk about where they're from. Where are the 13th tribe from? Where are these violent, sexually depraved, just waiting to be destroyed people? I can see why God wants them gone. If you look at the Talmud, if you just check out the Talmud, they hide it. And they tell people that anyone that tells people they think are Gentiles about the Talmud deserves death. I don't understand it. Don't they know they're the Gentiles? They'll find out shortly. All right, so this is what we got. 13th tribe, Arthur Koestler. We're going to figure out where they're from. Listen carefully.
The 13th tribe, Arthur Koestler. 6. Where from? 1. 2 basic facts emerge from our survey: the disappearance of the Khazar nation from its historic habitat, and the simultaneous appearance in adjacent regions to the northwest of the greatest concentration of Jews since the beginnings of the diaspora.
Oh, that's a nice little opening, isn't it? So the disappearance of the Khazar nation and the simultaneously appearance of a concentration of Jews in the diaspora. You know, these pale people are not Jews. They are converts. All of them are converts. They are European white people, Japhetic converts that have assumed the role of God's chosen people. We'll figure it out.
Since the two are obviously connected, historians agree that immigration from Khazaria must have contributed to the growth of Polish Jewry, a conclusion supported by the evidence cited in the previous chapters.
And as I stop there, remember, folks, that Netanyahu himself is a Polish Jew. In fact, most all of the white, European, pale-skinned, straight-haired, blue-eyed, turning red because the sun's killing their ass, they're from Poland, Russia, Czechoslovakia, the Slavs. They are a fragmented nation of nomads. They are a wandering group of Neanderthal barbarians. They are from Europe. You understand? They have nothing to do with what they call the Middle East. So this is the reason they find no peace. That's right, I'm a little bit excited.
But they feel less certain about the extent of this contribution, the size of the Khazar immigration compared with the influx of Western Jews, and their respective share in the genetic makeup of the modern Jewish community. In other words, the fact that Khazars emigrated in substantial numbers into Poland is established beyond dispute.
Boom! Boom! That's it. You are not the chosen. Boom! That's the end of it. It's over. You came from Khazaria. The prince of Ukraine kicked your goddamned asses, Khazars. And so you came down to Poland. Somebody tell Benjamin Netanyahu where the fuck he's from.
The question is whether they provided the bulk of the new settlement, or only its hardcore, as it were. To find an answer to this question, we must get some idea of the size of the immigration of real Jews from the West. 2. Towards the end of the first millennium, the most important settlements of Western European Jews were in France and the Rhineland *, not counting the Jews of Spain, who formed a category apart and did not participate in the migratory movements with which we are concerned.
Stop. Let's just stop. Now, you and I both know what they're talking about right there, all right? Now, this Koestler ain't going to give a Negro an inch to save our lives, not in his little dynamic, all right? But, the Spanish Jews, the Moors, and we know from studying that the Moors, the black Moors were a mixture of Hamites and Jews. Check my math. That's what the Moors were. They were a mixture, all right? And you can check the math because we've already done the study. Now, these Jews had nothing to do with the European converts that were conquered by the Prince of Ukraine, because the white European converted Jews are not the chosen. They have been put upon them Judaism by decree. King Bulan of Khazaria. I want to tell you another thing. When you talk about the Khazarian nation of European white people that became Jews, that have now sat their lily white asses right in the middle of a place they don't belong, nor are they welcome, when that happens, people are going to take notice. You understand? These folks are not the people they claim to be. And it burns me that on top of being a fake, phony group, they believe in something called the Talmud. I am literally off the train today. I'll get back. Here we go.
Some of these communities had probably been founded in Roman days, for, between the destruction of Jerusalem and the decline of the Roman Empire, Jews had settled in many of the greater cities under its rule and were later on reinforced by immigrants from Italy and North Africa. Thus we have records from the 9th century onwards of Jewish communities in places all over France, from Normandy down to Provence and the Mediterranean.
So what did they do? So here's what you have to believe. You have to somehow believe, and think about this, that these white people left Judea, black, with tight curly hair and bronze skin, burnt bronze skin, and then they went up to Europe and turned lily white, got blue eyes, blonde hair, and now burn in the goddamn sun. Now, after wandering about Europe, suddenly they want, through 2 world wars, to now descend back into what's now Palestine and tell everyone that this is where we're from. This is where we originate. It's a goddamned lie. I mean, it's a goddamned lie. This is interesting stuff. Here we go.
One group even crossed the Channel to England in the wake of the Norman invasion, apparently invited by William the Conqueror I because he needed their capital and enterprise. Their history has been summed up by Baron. They were subsequently converted into a class of royal usurers whose main function was to provide credits for both political and economic ventures.
Boom! That is the converted Jew. That is who they are. That's why they were wanted, and it's also why they were expelled. Usury. This ain't rocket science. They're known for this activity. All right, let's move.
After accumulating great wealth through the high rate of interest, these moneylenders were forced to disgorge it in one form or another for the benefit of the royal treasury. The prolonged well-being of many Jewish families, the splendor of their residence and attire, and their influence on public affairs blinded even experienced observers to the deep dangers lurking from the growing resentment of debtors of all classes, and the exclusive dependence of Jews on the protection of their royal masters.
So let me tell you what these people are about. Let me tell you what they do. So the king of Kazarian, King Bulon, converts the Jew, converts his heathen, hedonistic, pagan, wandering. These were nomads. They were no better than their counterparts. They're barbaric tribes of European white men. That's all they were, all from the Caucasus Mountains, got nothing to do with Shem. They are not Semitic. They are Japhetic. They're white people. That's first. So they saw an opportunity. They knew that the Judaistic faith was of God. They knew that the religion of Negroes, true Hebrews, us, they knew that was connected to God. But instead of wanting the actual blessing, the ethereal, intangible blessing that really gives nothing but the blessing, they wanted all the tangibles. They wanted the greed and the wealth. They wanted to be associated with God's chosen people, the jewels of God, and they wanted to be adorned with all the wealth that comes with that position, but they don't want any of the responsibility. They didn't bring the kingdom to this earth. They're not spreading their religion anywhere. What they're doing is they're keeping it to themselves. The faith of God Almighty, the Creator, put Negroes in position to spread his word throughout the earth and the worship practices. They don't spread their worship practices. In fact, they threaten death to anyone that exposes what they believe in that god-awful, disgusting piece of trash called the Talmud. Do you understand how backward these people are, how introverted they are? And as the sun shimmers above their weakening frames, we can see the folks in the state of Israel with the highest skin cancer rates on the planet. God's chosen my goddamned ass. They are not going to last. And the scriptures speak of their utter destruction. So, there's that. I'm going to get back to the show. All right, let's go, folks. Like, subscribe, share, do it all down there, please.
Rumblings of discontent, culminating in violent outbreaks in 1189 to 90, presaged the final tragedy, the expulsion of 1290. The meteoric rise, and even more rapid decline of English Jewry in the brief span of 2¼ century, 1066 to 1290, brought into sharp relief the fundamental factors shaping the destinies of all Western juries in the crucial first half of the second millennium. Point 2.
All right, so in other words, they didn't come from the Middle East. They're Europeans that were booted around Europe unwanted. And the reason they weren't wanted is because of usury, because of interest, because they made themselves wealthy on the backs of other people, all the while calling themselves the chosen of God. Can you imagine once the population got to look at that goddamned Talmud? You wonder why they wanted to put these motherfuckers in ovens. Are you serious? Are you serious? Let's continue.
The English example is instructive because it is exceptionally well documented compared to the early history of the Jewish communities on the continent. The main lesson we derive from it is that the social economic influence of the Jews was quite out of proportion with their small numbers.
In other words, they had more money than everybody else because the banking system that is run by Jews today, Janet Yellen, is a long list of individuals of Jewish ancestry that have run the Fed. And if you don't have a Jewish-backed bank in your country, you can expect to be overthrown. These are the facts, folks. Shit you should have known. You know I'm telling the truth. Let's continue.
There were, apparently, no more than 2,500 Jews in England at any time before their expulsion in 1290.
Stop. They got expelled out of England in 1290. Why? Why are these people getting kicked out of every goddamned place they were? And then determined, through 2 wars, to establish that they belong in a place they don't come from. Let me tell you what's going to happen, as the Bible states. Every last one of these goddamn people are going back to where they came from. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that comforting to know that no matter how hard Netanyahu fights, every one of those pale Europeans is going back home in the end? So you remember that. I hope somebody sends this to the ADL. You can send it to fucking Greenblatt. We know your history now. We can read. Let's continue.
Asterisk. According to the classic survey of Joseph Jacobs, the Jews of Angevin, England, based on recorded Jewish family names and other documents. Quoted by Barron, Volume 4, page 77. This tiny Jewish community in medieval England played a leading part in the country's economic establishment, much more so than its opposite number in Poland. Yet in contrast to Poland, it could not rely on a network of Jewish small towns to provide it with a mass basis of humble craftsmen, of lower middle-class artisans and workmen, carters and innkeepers. It had no roots in the people. On this vital issue, Angevin, England epitomized developments on the Western continent. The Jews of France and Germany faced the same predicament. Their occupational stratification was lopsided and top-heavy. This led everywhere to the same tragic sequence of events. The dreary tale always starts with a honeymoon and ends in divorce and bloodshed. In the beginning, the Jews are pampered with special charters, privileges, favors. They are personae non grati like the court alchemists, because they alone have the secret of how to keep the wheels of the economy turning.
Now you think about what they're saying, folks, and who these people are and how they fit intricately into the systems that they controlled and still control to this day. Now we've gotten a good insight on what they have to say in the Talmud, and now we see how they were run all over Europe. And let me tell you something, folks, Poland is where the vast majority of Jews relocated, and they didn't come from Israel. They were there in Europe all along. White people. They're not Shem, they're Japhet. They're from the Caucasus Mountains. They're barbarians. They're RH negative. In other words, Hitler was killing his own people. Continuing.
In the Dark Ages, wrote Cecil Roth, the commerce of Western Europe was largely in Jewish hands, not excluding the slave trade, and in the Carolingian cartularies Jew and merchant are used as almost interchangeable terms. 3. But with the growth of a native mercantile class, they became gradually excluded not only from most productive occupations, but also from the traditional forms of commerce, and virtually the only field left open to them was lending capital on interest.
So, what were they good for? That's the question. What this entire section tells me is they weren't good for anything other than money lending, usury, interest. Greedy individuals spread throughout Europe, unwanted, being moved here and there because their fragmented society, Khazaria, was destroyed. And these white converts to Judaism spread throughout Europe like the plague, and nobody wanted them. But then as the Arab slave trade turned into the transatlantic slave trade, they had an idea. Ship Negroes out of Judea and claim Palestine to be ours. They are nothing but liars. They are nothing but liars. I'll call that to their face, too. Let's continue.
The floating wealth of the country was soaked up by the Jews, who were periodically made to disgorge into the exchequer, for the archetype of Shylock was established long before Shakespeare's time.
Shylock is a term that's used to demand interest on money. Man, let me tell you something. You get down to the meat of what these individuals are, and you begin to understand the sentiment regarding them.
In the honeymoon days, Charlemagne had sent a historic embassy in 797 to Harun al-Rashid in Baghdad to negotiate a treaty of friendship. The embassy was composed of the Jew Isaac and 2 Christian nobles. The bitter end came when, in 1306, Philip le Bel expelled the Jews from the Kingdom of France.
Wait a minute. So they got expelled from England. What are we talking about? They got expelled from France. What are we talking about? They're being chased but they did not come from Israel. They didn't come from the Middle East. They were white. And they're being chased all over Europe because nobody wants their fucking asses, because they are money lenders. And as it said right here, Mr. Koestler exposes them. At first, they're welcome because they know how to run systems and they know how to move money. And then it kind of becomes obvious that they're there to fucking enrich themselves. Greedy fucking vipers. This is a synagogue of Satan, and they're exposed. Let's continue.
Though later some were allowed to return, they suffered further persecution, and by the end of the century, the French community of Jews was virtually extinct. The modern community of Jews in France and England was founded by refugees from the Spanish Inquisition in the 16th and 17th centuries.
Now, if you don't know about the Spanish Inquisition, brothers and sisters, ladies and germs, let me tell you something. Go to Big Judas show and you'll learn. This is all a connective conspiracy, and it's a vile creation, but it's soon to be removed and made way for the Negro nation. Yeah, let's do it.
3. If we turn to the history of German Jewry, the first fact to note is that, remarkably, we do not possess a comprehensive scholarly history of German Jewry. The Germanica Judaica is merely a good reference work to historic sources shedding light on individual communities up to 1238-5. It is a dim light, but at least it illuminates the territorial distribution of the Western Jewish communities in Germany during the critical period when Khazar Jewish immigration into Poland was approaching its peak.
Did you see that, folks? It says Khazar Jewish immigration into Poland was approaching its peak. Khazar Jewish immigration. The reason Khazar Jewish immigration was approaching its peak is because the Khazarians were defeated by the Prince of Ukraine. And so if the Prince of Ukraine defeated the kingdom of Khazaria, where did the converted Jews have to go? Well, a majority of them obviously went to Poland, and that's where Netanyahu's family comes from. Milosevic or something. His last name isn't even Netanyahu. They are fake, phony, watered-down people from the very beginning. They're not even real. It's the reason they make such an assertion of being real. They know what they are.
One of the earliest records of such a community in Germany mentions a certain Colonimus who, in 906, emigrated with his kinsfolk from Lucca in Italy to Mayence. About the same time we hear of Jews in spires and worms, and somewhat later in other places, Treviso, Metz, Strasbourg, Cologne, all of them situated in a narrow strip in Alsace and along the Rhine Valley.
Did they come from the Middle East? I'm sorry, did all these Jews who now claim that they own Jerusalem, the Middle East, what were they doing all up in Europe, being white as ghosts? I mean, if they were Jews, wouldn't they be down in Jerusalem? I don't understand. Why would they be wandering about? Don't they have what I see? Don't it make sense to you and me? I'm sure it does. Let's move on.
The Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela, see above, 2:8, visited the region in the middle of the 12th century and wrote, "In these cities there are many Israelites, wise men and rich, 6, but how many are many? In fact, very few, as will be seen." Earlier on, there lived in Mayence a certain Rabbi Gershom ben Yehuda, circa 960-1030, whose great learning earned him the title Light of the Diaspora and the position of spiritual head of the French and Rhenish German community. At some date around 1020, Gershom convened a rabbinical council in Worms, which issued various edicts, including one that put a legal stop to polygamy, which had anyway been in abeyance for a long time. To these edicts, a codicil was added, which provided that in case of urgency any regulation could be revoked by an assembly of 100 delegates from the countries Burgundy, Normandy, France, and the towns of Mayence, Spires, and Worms. In other rabbinical documents too, dating from the same period, only these three towns are named, and we can only conclude that the other Jewish communities in the Rhineland were at the beginning of the 11th century still too insignificant to be mentioned.
So let me just say this while we stop for a moment. Notice that they're mentioning nothing but European cities, towns, countries. Now the word Jewish takes on a whole new meaning when you can trace their lineage all the way back there and see none of them come from Jerusalem. None of them come from the Middle East. None of them come from Judea. They all come from the Caucasus Mountains. They all stem from barbaric Germanic tribes. They are white people. They are white people. That's what they are. Sorry.
Point 7. By the end of the same century, the Jewish communities of Germany narrowly escaped complete extermination in the outbursts of mob hysteria accompanying the First Crusade, AD 1096.
Whoa, you almost got another exterminate. What is it? Here's the deal. Why do they want to kill you all? I mean, they don't want to kill Negroes. Not overtly, but it's just kind of odd to me. I'm just a little curious. Everywhere you go, they want you dead. I don't know about all this, man. It's everybody else. It's everybody else. I don't get this, man. You can't go nowhere. You're kicked out of France, kicked out of England. You're almost destroyed. And what's the deal? You know, it could have something to do with that goddamn Talmud you Jews believe in.
F. Barker has conveyed the Crusaders' mentality with a dramatic force rarely encountered in the columns of the Encyclopedia Britannica A8. He might butcher all, till he waded ankle-deep in blood, and then at nightfall kneel, sobbing for very joy, at the altar of the sepulchre, for was he not read from the winepress of the Lord? The Jews of the Rhineland were caught in that winepress, which nearly squeezed them to death. Moreover, they themselves became affected by a different type of mass hysteria, a morbid yearning for martyrdom. According to the Hebrew chronicler Solomon Bar Simon, considered as generally reliable, the Jews of Mayence, faced with the alternative between baptism or death at the hands of the mob, gave the example to other communities by deciding on collective suicide attempts.
So let me frame what's happening here. So we went from England. They told the Jews to get out of England. Get out. That's what expulsion means. Went to France. The French people saw them, told them, get the fuck out. That's what expulsion means. Now they're in Germany. That's what the Rhineland means. And now they're being baptized into Christianity or being killed, and they're telling people to opt for suicide. Why is it everywhere you go, people want to fucking kill you, and it's not because you're chosen either? That's not true. That's not true. You're not chosen. In order for you to be chosen, you have to be a Jew, not Jewish. In order for you to be chosen, you have to be Hebrews. You're not Hebrews. You're white people that converted to the Negro religion and bastardized it with your goddamn Talmud. I wish one of you would smile in my fucking face.
10. Imitating on a grand scale Abraham's readiness to sacrifice Isaac, fathers slaughtered their children and husbands their wives. These acts of unspeakable horror and heroism were performed in the ritualistic form of slaughter with sacrificial knives sharpened in accordance with Jewish law. At times, the leading sages of the community, supervising the mass immolation, were the last to part with life at their own hands. In the mass hysteria, sanctified by the glow of religious martyrdom and compensated by the confident expectation of heavenly rewards, nothing seemed to matter but to end life before one fell into the hands of the implacable foes and had to face the inescapable alternative of death at the enemy's hand or conversion to Christianity.
You know what? I just thought about something. They know why they're hated. This isn't some goddamn riddle. This isn't a guess. They know why the world doesn't like them. Anybody that takes a peek into what they believe will be disgusted. I don't care what kind of religion you believe in. You know, when you talk about the Talmud and then you see the history that they've faced, they're playing the victims, and they're not victims, they're culprits. I want you to imagine while they're doing all this usury in France and in Germany and in England, what are they doing to the children of those places? What do you think's going on while they're money lending? I mean, the Talmud existed, right? So everything that they believed about the Goyim, they smiled in the Germans and the French and the English faces, those Anglo-Saxons, all the while adhering to the Talmud, thinking that they're Goy and can be cheated, can be left to die. What happens is they situate themselves in a community, and then people start investigating what the fuck they believe. And then these motherfuckers are invited to leave. That's what's going on. Perhaps they find a few of them with their children. You better fucking get with the program. You better know what the hell is being supported, why they're killing. They're not just killing to hold their position. They're killing to hide their goddamned secrets. Let's continue. That means you.
Turning from gore to sober statistics, we get a rough idea of the size of the Jewish communities in Germany. The Hebrew sources agree on 800 victims by slaughter or suicide, in Worms, and vary between 900 and 1300 for Mainz. Of course, there must have been many who preferred baptism to death, and the sources do not indicate the number of survivors, nor can we be sure that they do not exaggerate the number of martyrs. At any rate, Barron concludes from his calculations that the total Jewish population of either community had hardly exceeded the figures here given for the dead alone, 11, so the survivors in Worms or in Mainz could only have numbered a few hundred in each case. Yet these two towns, with Spires as a third, were the only ones important enough to be included in Rabbi Gersham's edict earlier on. Thus we are made to realize that the Jewish community in the German Rhineland was numerically small, even before the First Crusade, and had shrunk to even smaller proportions after having gone through the winepress of the Lord. Yet cast of the Rhine, in central and northern Germany, there were as yet no Jewish communities at all, and none for a long time to come. The traditional conception of Jewish historians that the Crusade of 1096 swept like a broom a mass migration of German Jews into Poland is simply a legend, or rather an ad hoc hypothesis invented because, as they knew little of Khazar history, they could see no other way to account for the emergence, out of nowhere, of this
So, think of what they're saying there. I need you to understand what's being said here. They're trying to hide the fact that they're Khazarians. They're trying to hide the fact that they are not the people of the book, that they have nothing to do with the Middle East, that they have nothing to do with Shem, and they're trying to sweep under the rug that they are from Khazaria and just somehow appeared in Poland, where Benjamin Netanyahu comes from. He's a goddamned Khazarian. That's what he is. He's a descendant of a Khazarian converted Jew. Before that, his people were heathens. That's what they were. They were nomads. They went from tents to mud fucking huts. That's what they are. That's what they stem from. Moving on.
unprecedented concentration of Jews in Eastern Europe. Yet there is not a single mention in the contemporary sources of any migration, large or small, from the Rhineland further east into Germany, not to mention distant Poland. Thus Simon Dubnov, one of the historians of the older school, the First Crusade which set the Christian masses in motion towards the Asiatic East, drove at the same time the Jewish masses towards the cast of Europe. 12. However, a few lines further down he has to admit about the circumstances of this emigration movement, which was so important to Jewish history, we possess no close information. 13. Yet we do possess abundant information of what these battered Jewish communities did during the first and subsequent crusades. Some died by their own hands, others tried to offer resistance and were lynched, while those who survived owed their good fortune to the fact that they were given shelter for the duration of the emergency in the fortified castle of the bishop or burgrave who, at least theoretically, was responsible for their legal protection. Frequently this measure was not enough to prevent a massacre, but the survivors, once the crusading hordes had passed, invariably returned to their ransacked homes and synagogues to make a fresh start. We find this pattern repeatedly in Chronicles, in Treves, in Metz, and many other places. By the time of the Second and later Crusades, it had become almost a routine. At the beginning of the agitation for a new crusade, many Jews of Mayence, Worms, Spires, Strasbourg, Würzburg, and other cities escaped to neighboring castles, leaving their books and precious possessions in the custody of friendly burghers.
So they're being run out of all of Europe. Jews are not welcome anywhere in Europe, but they're from Europe and they are Europeans. So what do we have here? We know that the Kazarian nation existed and served as a buffer to keep the barbarian white people from the Caucasus Mountains spreading into what was the lower portion of the world. And because they were pressed from both sides to become Christians or to become Muslims, the king of Khazaria, King Bulan, chose Judaism, and both Christianity and Islam were puzzled as to why you would choose that religion. And upon being conquered by the Prince of Ukraine, this country of people now were displaced. They had no place in Europe because that was filled with Catholics, and they couldn't go, kind of southeast because that's kind of Muslim, is Islam. So now they're stuck in Europe pretending to be Negroes. Guess what they were doing? They're in Europe, displaced, conquered, and now they can't go anywhere. So a mass influx of them wound up in Poland. They went over into England. They went into Germany. They went into France. And everywhere they went, they were told to get the fuck out. And after some thought and after Zionism developed and over the years, that's when the thought came through the transatlantic slave trade, our being positioned here according to prophecy, came to their mind, might as well claim Palestine, which they don't belong. They have no association. They're all Europeans. So where do they come from? We know where they come from. They come from the same place they've been kicked the fuck out of. They're white people. They're Europeans. They're Japhetic. They have melanin not associated with Hebrews. We are Shem. They are not. All right, I think I've made that point. Let's continue.
14. One of the main sources is the Book of Remembrance by Ephraim Bar Jacob, who himself, at the age of 13, had been among the refugees from Cologne in the castle of Wochenberg. 15. Solomon Bar Simon reports that during the Second Crusade the survivors of the Mayence Jews found protection in Spires, then returned to their native city and built a new synagogue. 16. This is the leitmotif of the Chronicles. To repeat it once more, there is not a word about Jewish communities emigrating toward Eastern Germany, which, in the words of Mises 17, was still Judenrein, clean of Jews, and was to remain so for several centuries.
So before we continue, is anyone thinking during all of this time, 1100, 907, why wouldn't they go back to Jerusalem if they're supposed to be Jews? I would have made a beeline. Listen, they claim that that's where they're from. Why didn't they take their lily white asses to Judea back in 1100? Because they knew they wouldn't be accepted there. They knew they'd be run the fuck out of Judea. They wouldn't tolerate so many of them coming down there. But see, they had a strategy. And the strategy was first to enrich themselves and then to manipulate governments, to control governments to the point that First World War, Second World War, remember that the Balfour Act was written in 1897. And then they progressed World War I and World War II to insert their lily white asses where they don't belong, in the middle of the Middle East. And let's take it one step further. The day that these white folks came down and claimed that they were of the tribe of Judah, that they were the descendants of David, they were told that they wouldn't have peace day one. That was 1948. And they built an iron dome and they made the place their home and all the things that people do when they out and they roam, right? And every day they're told that they're trying to be made to go away. And so when they get attacked, then they act like, wow, they act surprised. They're indignant. Why would you attack us? You took this, you don't fucking belong there. That's why they attacked you. Where are they from? The Jew. Where are they from? They're from Europe. That's where they originate. Netanyahu is from fucking Poland. Let's continue.
4. The 13th century was a period of partial recovery. We hear for the first time of Jews in regions adjacent to the Rhineland, the Palatinate, AD 1225, Freiburg, 1230, Ulm, 1243, Heidelberg, 1255, etc. 18, but it was to be only a short respite, for the 14th century brought new disasters to Franco-German Jewry.
So why don't they go back home now? Why don't they? We've been going down the line of lists. We've been going from 970 to 11 something to 12. Now we're at 1225. Why don't you carry your Jewish asses back to Judea at this point? Because you ain't from there and you never have been from there.
The first catastrophe was the expulsion of all Jews from the royal domains of Philip le Bel. France had been suffering from an economic crisis to the usual accompaniments of debased currency and social unrest. Philip tried to remedy it by the habitual method of soaking the Jews. He exacted from those payments of 100,000 livres in 1292, 215,000 livres in 1295, 1299, 1302 and 1305, then decided on a radical remedy for his ailing finances. On June 21, 1306, he signed a secret order to arrest all Jews in his kingdom on a given day, confiscate their property, and expel them from the country.
Why didn't they go home? Why is this continually happening to these people? It's because they're not the fucking people. They're some other goddamned people. And they're not wanted any place they go. And they didn't come from Judea, so you know. These people are just wandering about Europe, and I can just imagine it just came to them suddenly. After being kicked out of every fucking country they go in, that's the reason they started this whole shit and shenanigans. I see what's going on.
The arrests were carried out on July 22nd, and the expulsion a few weeks later. The refugees emigrated into regions of France outside the king's domain, Provence, Burgundy, Aquitaine, and a few other feudal fiefs.
Why didn't they go home? Doesn't this make sense now, folks? These descendants claim to be true Jews. Throughout this entire 1,000-year dynamic, they haven't made a move toward the Middle East until their 2 world wars, and then suddenly now this is where we belong. Whoa. We've been kicking your lily white asses all throughout Europe for centuries. Now suddenly you belong in the Middle East. That's your land. That's where you originate from. The fucking devil's a lie. Fucking European imposters.
But, according to Mises, There are no historical records whatsoever to indicate that German Jewry increased its numbers through the sufferings of the Jewish community in France in the decisive period of its destruction. Point 19. And no historian has ever suggested that French Jews trekked across Germany into Poland, either on that occasion or at any other time. Under Philip's successors there were some partial recalls of Jews, in 1315 and 1350, but they could not undo the damage, nor prevent renewed outbursts of mob persecution. By the end of the 14th century, France, like England, was virtually Judenrein.
That means Juden-free. Now let's ask this question again, folks. Now we're at 1350, and they're getting kicked out of countries. What's going on? What's the problem? We don't get the frame of the picture? We can't solve them? What's up? They're not wanted anywhere. They seem to be kicked out of every fucking country they go in. Why? They're taking their wealth. Why? How are they getting wealth? How? Let's not look at this as if they are not what they are, because we see them. We see them. That's what they're mad at. That's what they're mad. Now the Talmud to this. Now I want you to imagine them coming into countries and people getting a hold of their goddamn Talmud. I want you to imagine somebody understanding what oral circumcision is and somebody catches a glimpse of that. Who the fuck are these people? Don't you know? They're closely associated with Satan. Just keep going.
5. The second catastrophe of that disastrous century was the Black Death, which, between 1348 and 1350, killed off a third of Europe's population.
I'm sorry, what? What happened there? What happened to them? Talk to me, what happened?
The second catastrophe of that disastrous century was the Black Death, which, between 1348 and 1350, killed off a third of Europe's population, and in some regions even 2/3. It came from East Asia via Turkestan, and the way it was let loose on Europe, and what it did there is symbolic of the lunacy of man.
Check this out.
A Tartar leader named Janibek in 1347 was besieging the town of Kaffa, now Feodosia, in the Crimea, then a Genoese trading port. The plague was rampant in Janibek's army, so he catapulted the corpses of infected victims into the town, whose population became infected in its turn.
Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? What he did was, he took some this is how the Black Plague happened in Europe. This is how it happened. He took bodies and he catapulted the corpses into town, and the town became infected.
Genoese ships carried the rats and their deadly fleas westward into the Mediterranean ports, from where they spread inland. The bacilli of Pastorella pestis were not supposed to make a distinction between the various denominations, yet Jews were nevertheless singled out for special treatment. After being accused earlier on of the ritual slaughter of Christian children, they were now accused of poisoning the wells to spread the Black Death. The legend traveled faster even than the rats, and the consequence was the burning of Jews en masse all over Europe. Once more, suicide by mutual self-immolation became a common expedient to avoid being burned alive.
Why are they hated so? Why does hate follow these people wherever they go? I sure as hell would like to know.
The decimated population of Western Europe did not reach its pre-plague level again until the 16th century. As for its Jews, who had been exposed to the twofold attack of rats and men, only a fraction survived. As Kuchera wrote, the populace avenged on them the cruel blows of destiny and set upon those whom the plague had spared with fire and sword. When the epidemics receded, Germany, according to contemporary historians, was left virtually without Jews. We are led to conclude that in Germany itself the Jews could not prosper and were never able to establish large and populous communities. How, then, in these circumstances, should they have been able to lay the foundations in Poland of a mass population so dense that at present, AD 1909, it outnumbers the Jews of Germany at the rate of 10 to 1? It is indeed difficult to understand how the idea ever gained ground that the Eastern Jews represent immigrants from the West, and especially from Germany. Point 20.
So the question in their minds, and just to give you a heads up, we're covering the 13th tribe where these Ashkenazi Kazarian converts originate. And we're getting a clear picture, not only of where they come from, but also at the beginning of the show, what they believe. And if you connect the usury, the capitalistic enrichment and the practices of these creatures, along with their religious practices and the beliefs regarding sexual depravement in children, it's no wonder that at first, with their wealth and their influence and their ability to manipulate systems, that they're welcome. But you get a close peer into the dynamics of what makes Jews Jews. And let me tell you something, man. Let me tell you something. You begin to understand why they were not tolerated for any amount of time in those lands. And this is out in the open. This is totally outspoken. We are not going to hide it anymore. We're going to get this out. So without doubt, maybe your jaws will hit the floor.
Yet, next to the First Crusade, the Black Death is most frequently invoked by historians as the deus ex machina which created Eastern Jewry. And, just as in the case of the Crusades, there is not a shred of evidence for this imaginary exodus.
Oh, I like that.
On the contrary, the indications are that the Jews' only hope of survival on this, as on those earlier occasions, was to stick together and seek shelter in some fortified place or less hostile surroundings in the vicinity. There is only one case of an emigration in the Black Death period mentioned by Mises. Jews from Spires took refuge from persecution in Heidelberg, about 10 miles away. After the virtual extermination of the old Jewish communities in France and Germany in the wake of the Black Death, Western Europe remained Judenrein for a couple of centuries, with only a few enclaves vegetating on, except in Spain. It was an entirely different stock of Jews who founded the modern communities of England, France, and Holland in the 16th and 17th centuries, the Sephardim, Spanish Jews, forced to flee from Spain where they had been resident for more than a millennium.
Now those more likely are Negroes.
Their history and the history of modern European Jewry lies outside the scope of this book.
I like that. It lies outside. Yeah, because they're talking about us and you ain't going to touch that.
We may safely conclude that the traditional idea of a mass exodus of Western Jewry from the Rhineland to Poland all across Germany, a hostile Julius Glassy, is historically untenable. It is incompatible with the small size of the Rhenish communities, their reluctance to branch out from the Rhine Valley towards the east, their stereotyped behavior in adversity, and the absence of references to migratory movements in contemporary chronicles. Further evidence for this view is provided by linguistics, to be discussed in Chapter 7.
All right, so there you have it, ladies and germs. That is the 13th tribe, where from, as well as what the Jews, the Talmud believes regarding different beliefs. I do appreciate it. It's the most folks I've ever had here. And somebody said that maybe you want to take questions or maybe have somebody ask a question. I'd be happy or make a comment. I'm looking at all the comments now and I appreciate you being here. The Doug Rice Show is brought to you by Twidwear. And yes, I cut my hair and I no longer wear the hat. I'm waiting for my Twidwear hat, and that's that. Guys, you need to like, subscribe, and share this live with everyone you know. This is Arthur Koestler's The 13th Tribe, and this has been the Doug Rice Show. Now, you can get this PDF, still and yet, and a bunch more that we have at our PDF store. If you have any other requests to read, just tell me and I'll fill the need. I appreciate you guys being here. You folks are awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. Like, subscribe this live, because the information is is too important not to be spread throughout the nation. All right. I feel good. 9:29. You're looking at the Doug Rice Show, and I am about done. And I do have to go, but I do appreciate your being here and being with me, drawing your ears near. Tomorrow we'll go through some other stuff. And hey, I appreciate your time. You guys have yourself a wonderful day. Do me a favor, if you're going out there, get that goddamn grin off your face. But more importantly, go to Twidwear and purchase some Twid gear, either the skincare, beard oil. They got a lot of stuff. And what I really like is the clothing. It's very, very heavy, very, very, very heavy, okay? I'm here in Phoenix. All right, folks, thanks so much for being here. This is Doug Rice. Thanks for looking at me. Like, subscribe, share. Oh, I do have my giving links down there. All right, I feel good. You guys have a wonderful day like you know you should. Twidwear, that's what I do, baby. See ya.